How much of your identity and emotional well-being is tied to your work? Be it your career, your family, your schooling, or any other project that you devote your days to. As you put your labor in throughout the week, what is the ultimate manifestation of it in your life? For most of the ancient Israelites, it was livestock. Goats, oxen, sheep. These animals represented the investment of their time and energy on a very high level. The amount of resources that went into raising them was huge. Even more, raising an animal from baby to an adult requires care and bonding, requires attachment, which is itself the root of emotional response. In her book, Cruel Optimism, Professor Lauren Berlant defines the experience of cruel optimism as one in which someone has formed an attachment to something over which they have no control, and then realize that this thing is also constitutive of their identity. It is the realization that the things we hold dearest, the things outside of us which define us, are always actually out of reach. We can never have full authority over them. The ritual of sacrifice, as described in this week's Torah portion, highlights this truth. It forced the Israelites to reckon with the powers outside of themselves and to build resilience in letting go of external sites of identification. By sacrificing something dear to them, they were forced to fully experience the painful emotional realities inherent to the human lack of control. They watched an animal that they raised from birth be killed, its blood splashed on the altar, then dismembered, and then burned. We have no parallel institution in our culture today. The feelings that this ritual must have evoked, grief, loss, powerlessness, are today enemies that we seek to distance ourselves from as much as possible. The problem with this is that in our estrangement from these feelings, they gain control over us. Sacrifice brought congruence and perspective to these feelings, providing a space for people to put themselves aside, to become acquainted with the realities of grief, loss, and powerlessness. Berlant makes it clear that this is at the core of her understanding of cruel optimism. She writes, "In scenarios of cruel optimism, we are forced to suspend ordinary notions of repair and flourishing to ask whether the survival scenarios we attach to those affects weren't the problem in the first place." Knowing how to assess what's unraveling there is one way to measure the impasse of living in the overwhelmingly present moment. This unraveling that she refers to is a collection of decidedly negative feelings. No one likes them. I don't like them. But in order to befriend the feelings, in order to get in touch with our own affect, rather than having it control us, we must call up these unpleasant feelings, just as the ancient Israelites did during sacrifice. This is why the sacrificial cult was the way to redemption. Sacrificing in order to atone forced the individual to experience all of these feelings, not only the ones in relation to the sin they had committed. In turn, it helped them to empathize more with others, understand what it meant to feel loss, pain, and powerlessness, and to hopefully not want to ever inflict it on someone else again. On top of this, sacrifice was also used to show gratitude or a desire for connection with God. There were even sacrifices offered on Shabbat as a mode of actively creating a space to dwell with God. So these negative feelings that we avoid, loss, grief, and powerlessness, were also a path to encountering God in Israelite religion. They created a broken heart, an idea also central to the mystical understanding of what it means to encounter the divine. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the great Hasidic master, taught, brokenheartedness and depression are not at all the same. Depression comes from the side of evil and is hated by God. But a broken heart is very dear and precious to God. And after brokenheartedness comes joy. This later joy is a true sign of a broken heart. On this Shabbat, take a moment to appreciate the power of affect and attachment in your life, to appreciate that brokenheartedness itself can be a path to God and to eventual joy. Can you set aside some time on this day of spiritual connection to confront the possibilities of loss and pain, of grief and powerlessness? What would it mean for you to become familiar with them, to remove the fear attached to them, and instead open up to brokenheartedness as a gateway to the divine? This Shabbat, may we all find a new way forward, inspired by the sacrifices of our ancestors, a way to rework our own cruel optimism, our own broken hearts into later joy.